Hi, everybody. This is the Systems Culture Growth Podcast. And I am here with my longtime friend, Jack Kosakowski of Creation Agency. And I'm going to be talking to Jack about his journey into starting and building an agency, his background into what we consider entrepreneurship, intrapreneurship, and everything else about building a personal brand and leadership. So thank you so much for joining me, Jack. It's so good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Long time no talk. Thanks for having me. I actually saw our old professor the other day post, and I thought of you, Janelle Hoffman.
Oh, my goodness.
Posted on LinkedIn. I thought, oh my God, back in the day, huh?
I know it feels like a lifetime ago, but yeah. So actually, that's a good point. We both pursued hospitality and did a stint in the hotel and hospitality world.
Neither of us ended up in it. That's the best part.
I'm actually rereading Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain, and it's taking me like right back to 10, 15 years ago. So it's been fun.
It was an expensive degree, that's for sure. Never used.
Do you think any of that applies to what you're doing now?
I don't know, maybe the people part of hospitality, but I mean, I don't know. Who knows? Probably. I mean, I'm not going to say that I regret like getting a degree, but it definitely sucks writing a check for student loans every month. That's for sure.
For sure. I like to think it applies in different ways. And like you said, the people portion. So we'll take that and make it feel like it's worth our money.
Exactly.
So one of my favorite things is seeing friends evolve over time. And I know that I don't know, whatever it was, about a decade ago or whatever, we had a conversation. And you probably don't remember this, but it seemed like I was in my mid-20s. It seemed like you were kind of taking a new direction in your life or pivoting. And it really inspired me to kind of take an assessment of my life and say, all right, am I living up to my full potential? So I don't know if that was a pivotal moment for you, or if you remember or recall a certain time in your life where you're like, I'm going to go from hospitality, kind of front desk work, to now becoming a CEO of a company. That's a broad question, but what inspired you to take on such an ambitious role?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think it just kind of evolved there without like me consciously going there, if that makes sense. I just kind of like I don't know, your career is just a weird thing, right? It's like, if you look at where you're at like right now, and then you like look at where you're at like 5 years later, like there's like, you just kind of like see this weird trajectory, like weird path of how you got there. That's kind of like my whole thing was, I knew I was kind of like passionate after selling marketing technology. I guess I didn't even realize that I was like passionate about the services side till like kind of like I fell into place and opened up the US division of the agency that I'm at now, and watched it evolve and grow. But I can't say there was like a pivotal moment where I was like, I think there's a pivotal moment where I was like, okay, I've got to give up my old lifestyle if I want to like be, good in my career, which is like, getting hammered on the weekends and, just living this lifestyle that's kind of like, I don't know, your college lifestyle. And, you really have to give up doing all the fun stuff on the weekends. Like, I hate to say that, but like to make a business work and to grow it, like you really have to change your entire lifestyle. That's just my opinion. Maybe other people can live the wildlife and still make that happen, but I just couldn't do it. I had to like give up everything and really focus on the business.
So you decided to dedicate yourself to this next chapter of your life. And I know you're happily married with a beautiful wife. I'm curious. I read an article, I think it was in Forbes, but you had talked about your grandfather, Black Jack.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit more about him, and maybe one story to share of perhaps that's who might have inspired you to kind of really pursue your passions?
Yeah, no, my grandfather was, kind of born poor, didn't have anything, like, grew up with his grandma who was on welfare. And luckily, I got to grow up, my mom was a single mom, so I got to spend a lot of time with my grandparents. And my grandfather actually built a very successful direct business. He sold heat and smoke detectors. So he actually built like a really successful direct sales business. And as I grew up, I got to like watch him speak. You know, he was friends with Zig Ziglar,
Wow.
Judge Ziglar. So he was kind of like in that circle of like the old school kind of Tony Robbins per se world. And so I did get to see him speak, do motivational speeches and all that stuff. And you know, as you grow up and you're kind of involved, you're kind of like ingrained in that environment. Like you don't realize it as a kid, but as you get older, like those kind of fundamentals of business and mindset and all that stuff kind of stick with you. And
Mm.
so, you know, I'm lucky that happened. I think it had a big, I mean, I know it had a big impact on my life.
Do you have a particular story about blackjack and something inspirational the listeners could take away?
I mean, I'll just say that one thing about my grandfather was he had like some crazy magnetic when you are people that were around him just like loved him, like almost like he would turn himself into a celebrity. And so I just
Wow.
remember like watching him speak at a 2,000 person conference one time, and you know, I just remember like some guy turned to me and he was like, "Hey, you're really really lucky to have him as your grandfather." And I was like, "Oh man, that's you know crazy." Like he just like lit a room on fire, like 2,000 salespeople, got him real excited, and you know helped changed a lot of people's lives, right? Like changed their lifestyles, made them a lot of money. And you know, I was lucky, right? I think it was, you know, it was cool to be able to see somebody walk into a room and impact them that you had such a close relationship with that had such an impact on my life. And,
Hmm.
you know, hopefully I can carry that on. I will say that there's just so many things that he taught me that I've kind of applied to, you know, the business today, you know, through like leadership, the way you know, just the way I treat people, especially internally and externally, the way that I do business, you know, all of those kind of things were instilled in me from a young age because of the way that he treated people, the way that he built his business. So I don't think I've consciously ever thought about it, but it's probably got way more impact than I know.
Yeah. And from my perspective and kind of, joining this LinkedIn community and seeing all these social channels, you actually remind me a little bit of Gary Vee. And for the reason that I feel like you were an early adopter of sharing your message and what you call social selling on all of these social media platforms. And people like me were 6, 7, 8 years behind you. You've been building this platform. You've been utilizing this, these types of channels to really connect with your audience. But more importantly than quote unquote social selling, I can say from a personal experience that I've always actually felt that you care, like you're there to help people and listen. So I'm kind of curious when your grandfather was on stage in front of 2,000 people and had this charisma, you're now doing that from my perspective to your audience online and virtually. Would you say there's some sort of connection there, or was that a conscious decision to start putting out your message and building an audience?
I have to say, I've kind of, as the business has grown, I've started to suck a little more about doing what you're talking about. But yeah, I think we're living in crazy times, right? Like, I mean, imagine if somebody told you, you know, 15 or 20 years ago in the advertising world that you know, a mom in Montana talking about like, I don't know, like her baby's breast milk could have a million people following her, right? Like she could get 10 million views on a post every time she posts something on social media. Like she would have, you know, 100,000 email subscribers. She would have more email subscribers than, you know, a big brand with multi-millions of dollars. Like, I mean, the world that we're living in right now is just crazy. Like, no longer does TV like dictate the medium, right? I mean, YouTube, like I follow some vloggers that are getting, you know, 10x the amount of views that a TV show is, right? And these guys are like literally filming at home. And you know, these TV shows are spending millions of dollars on production. So I think when I started to think about this early was I was like, holy crap, like this is a vehicle for selling because I was using it as like more
Mm,
of like a, you know, one-to-one B2C selling tool for B2B products. But now it's just like evolved so freaking much. Now I wish I had more time, and maybe that's just an excuse that I use because that's what all executives, you know, say about their you know using excuse of their time. But I mean, the whole business. I built $1.5 million part of the agency from using social media, right? Like I would have, if you eliminated the social media piece of it, like I don't think I would have a successful business. I don't think it would be possible because I couldn't reach all the people that I reached, you know, in the time that I did. So it's been transformational, and the clients that are using it that we're working with right now, like they are just crushing it, right? The ones that honestly understand how to get their CEO's message in front of thousands of people, those are the industries that are winning.
Yeah, incredible. And I think too, you talk about not having the time now to put in as much as you'd like, but you started with building your audience and practicing, and now you're actually able to reap the benefits of that from what I can see. Can you tell us about Creation Agency? I know your tagline is the Curious Marketing Agency, and I'm actually super curious to know why you use that tagline.
So my business partners are British, and so they have different senses of humor. But I think we're living in a time of marketing where it's just harder and harder to do anything. I mean, plain and simple, like paid media is so expensive right now, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but like if you're a small company with like a small budget, like good luck with paid media. I mean, these clicks on LinkedIn are between $8 and $20 for a click, right? That's not for a conversion,
Wow.
that's for a click. So
Wow.
we're just living in like crazy times where things are getting really expensive. The bigger companies, especially with all the funding, are just they're literally will throw hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of ad spend into own different key terms on Google, on LinkedIn. So it's like, what do you do as a small business? And I think you just have to start to get more curious, right? Like you have to get curious as to like, what can we try that we haven't tried before that could work? And it just comes down to this. Like our clients are just, they're just curious, just want to know what works because they've tried everything else. So that's kind of what our
Mm-hmm.
job is, right? Is to become the scientists of curiosity and to say, hey, let's try these 3 to 5 things. Let's see if these work. If they don't work, we'll have to go to plan B because what used to work is just no longer working in marketing. And I mean, I just hate to say it, but it's just a tough game out there. Like there's no way to sugarcoat it. Like, I used to be able to get on client calls and say, hey, if we do X, Y, and Z, like I can guarantee you almost with certainty that I'm going to get you results. And I literally can't do that anymore. Like to start a podcast right now, like if you started a podcast 5 years ago, it was, it was fairly easy to build a following. If you started podcast today, I mean, unless you really put your weight into it and you really heavily take it, super serious, like you just won't have a lot of success with podcasts. Like it's just really, really tough. I don't
Right.
remember what the stat was, but I saw like whatever, it was just astronomical how many people start a podcast every day and then how many people start a podcast every year. Today's marketing is just getting harder and harder, and you just really have to try to find 1 or 2 things that work really well and get really, really good at them.
Yeah, I liked the tagline because I consider myself a curious person and a scientist as well. And whether it's sales and marketing or whether it's operations and recruiting, right now you really have to get curious. Everything is changing. All the landscape is changing. And I think entrepreneurs and business owners that stay stuck in the ways things used to be, or something's not working internally, might be frustrating. But the only answer is to truly get curious. So that resonated with me a lot. And it's although a little depressing to hear that you don't have all the magical words of wisdom, that we could just plug and play into our businesses. But it is, refreshing to know that, those who are putting their weight into it and are getting really curious about any obstacles within their business, there are solutions out there and there are experts that can lead the way because of your tons of experience. You had mentioned kind of first being the fast sales and marketer and putting all your weight into that direction. And now it seems like you're working inside your business a lot more. Do you have a team that supports you from an operations standpoint, or what's your kind of team composition?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Shoot. Thank God. So I've got, 2 people that play a huge role. So one is our COO who does all of the, financial stuff, hiring, and SOWs, kind of does all that stuff, kind of supports the sales motion that I'm doing on the top end. And then actually my wife, who's head of operations, she manages all of the project management team and then how all of our projects get managed. I think if I had to say to somebody, how would you have a successful agency, marketing agency, or any type of business? It's all the procedural stuff. Like, what's the experience the customer gets on their end to make sure that whatever's happening, like the whole processes around whatever's happening, actually gets delivered, and that they can see at any time what's going on. Like, hey, if we're working on getting a landing page created for a client, like there's different steps, right? Like there's design, then there's copy, then there's approvals, and then there's builds, and then there's links, and there's but like the clients and we have a really high retention rate because we figured that part out. It's like they want to see what's happening when, right, during that layer. So, I mean, operationally, like I can actually sleep at night the way that we have the business running right now, right? Like, I lost a lot of sleep from the operation side for a few years, but now that we've got that figured out, like I think it's key, and then it allows me to like actually spend my time doing revenue operating activities, or I spend a lot of time with our clients too, right? Making sure that things are happening.
Yeah. So it sounds like putting the internal systems and, of course, having the right people in place to operate those systems really improves client satisfaction and retention. And like you said, help you sleep at night so that your focus is where you're the most creative, where you create the most impact. How long do you think it took you to figure out that combination and delegate the hat of operations?
Oh man. I mean, it took us a few years, I would say, maybe 3 years to really
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we just started to master it in year 4 or 5, but it took
Okay.
us. I mean, I think the other thing is that as your operations evolve, your business evolves, right? So right when you think that like you've got your operations at a point where you need it to be, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, something else changed in the business. So now you have to redo your operations for the new system. So,
Yeah.
at some point it is kind of an ever evolving process as well. Like I do believe that like, you're always optimizing, but 3 to 5 years, I would say, is what it takes from my experience. Probably,
Yeah.
with more employees, right? I think we only have 15 in the U.S. We have 100 globally, but like
Wow.
we've built our operations for people in the U.S., right? So it's like, and now we're
Sure.
working on a global. Like at first, it was just the U.S., and
Mm.
then now recently we've said, okay, we're going to go global. So now this is a whole different process of operations on a global level, which is like still a major work in progress, but
Yeah.
we can get that figured out. I think that's why, to be fair, I think that's why when companies get acquired, a lot of times I don't think people realize it, but yeah, it's like maybe it's the product, but it's also the process sometimes behind
Mm.
how the companies run and how people engage and interact. So I've like personally learned some few lessons to say, like, if you are looking to get acquired at some point, like your business, like you better make sure you're operationally sound because, you know, most companies aren't. So if they could come in and buy your processes alone, that could be worth multi-millions of dollars to
Yeah.
some, to some people.
So, such an important part. I just met with a business broker and he talked about how, investors are purchasing the process and the system and obviously looking at the financial component, the data. Um, and if the individuals inside the organization can't separate themselves from those two things, then it's not, necessarily a great investment for companies. You had mentioned a distributed team that's evolving and growing and probably has even changed in the last couple of months or year. And you also work with your wife. So I'm curious to know, like, what's your team like? How do you build a culture with a remote distributed team?
I mean, it's tough. I think we tried to build a culture that's not micromanagey, right? So like,
Mm.
I think you have to go about building culture different ways. Like some people want to come into a company and they want games and they want this and they want that. I mean, we're a remote only company, right? Even before COVID, like we're remote only. I think, I think from, and I guess my employees could tell me if I'm wrong, but I've, had a lot of conversations about this is they just kind of want to do what they need to do, right? And
Mm,
we have limited meetings. We don't have a lot of meetings internally. People are kind of it's up to their own their own cognizance, I should used to say, to like schedule meetings when they need them.
mm,
We interact all through Slack, and my the culture I try to build is like a non micromanaging culture where like if you want to like leave during the day and go get groceries, or you want to go get your hair cut at 2 o'clock because your work's done, that's the culture I want, right? Like I
yeah,
don't want to be interrupting my employees as like with cheesy stuff, with the cheesy like, oh, we're doing this cultural stuff because it makes sense. I tell everybody that works for us, like, listen, like I'm not gonna bug you. Like you're gonna have more problems not hearing from me than hearing from you, right? Like, so if
right.
you need me, you just gotta tell me you need me, and I'll be there for you. But like we're just not gonna proactively reach out. We want you just to do your job, and then we'll help train you up. But I mean, that's tough, right? Like I've had this discussion internally many times. Like, should we be doing like a weekly team meeting? Should we be doing like a monthly wine tasting? I don't know, all
Yeah.
that stuff. And for the most part, most of the feedback's been just leave me alone and let me do my job, right? And
Yeah.
that's kind of like the culture that I want to build. I know that's changing with like Gen Z and stuff. Like they want more like interaction, but I think you as a company kind of have to decide like what direction you're going to go, and then
Yeah.
let people know beforehand, like, hey, like if you're looking for if you need a lot of interaction and hand holding, like we're not the company for you, right? Like if you're looking for the
Right.
ping pong tables or the wine tastings and all that, like we just don't do that. What we will give you is a lot of flexibility and a lot of freedom to just do your job and run your own schedule.
Yeah.
And I do, the people that have left, we don't have a lot of people that left, but I just had a girl that left, and she just simply stated like we didn't have enough interaction, and I said, okay, that, like I couldn't have saved her from staying. It just, what we have doesn't fit. So I think you got to figure out what you are and then stick to that, because you won't make everybody happy.
Yeah, no. And you mentioned the ping pong tables, which I can kind of think most people consider culture. And there's a little bit of a sigh of like, oh, how do we build culture? Right. But the actions you're taking, the curiosity you and your leadership are taking are actually building this culture. You're getting really intentional about the culture you want to build. And it sounds like you're screening for that in your hiring process to say, this is who we are. These are the resources we're delivering to you. We're always getting curious and looking for other solutions and feedback. But if you're looking for something different, we want to be upfront and honest that it might not be a mutual fit at this stage. So that's really important. Um, and I'm curious, we're kind of to wrap up here right now in this stage of your business and the world that we live in today. What would you say entrepreneurs should be thinking about? Or what questions would you leave them to start getting curious about, since that's the theme of the show today?
So I think that what I'm struggling with, from the agency side with customers, is getting them to understand long-term versus short-term demand
Mm,
in the market. And so we're kind of at a turning point right now where you used to kind of be able to buy your way into new leads and new kind of opportunities, but that's changing, right? Like we're getting to a point where you really actually have to create demand. Like
mm,
you have to start to create content that thinks long term versus short term. Have a mix of content that, like, you're just not going to go be able to go buy Google leads anymore. Like you're not,
mm,
Facebook leads are getting less quality, especially on the B2B side. LinkedIn is like astronomically expensive. So you've got to really come up with a plan that's not thinking about how many leads am I going to get next week, how many leads am I going to get next month, but like, hey, from a year from now, how many people are going to search for my business, right? How many people are going to reach out to me on LinkedIn and ask me, hey, can you help us, or we want to figure out how you can help us. Like, you've got to start thinking about how you create true demand through, more word of mouth referrals, more
mm,
um, G2 referrals. Like you've really got to start to think about how you can drive people to you and get people talking about you. And just most companies are not there yet. Like their
Yeah.
CEOs, a lot of CEOs still don't understand marketing, especially the modern day way of marketing. The attribution has changed, everything has changed, but the mentality's really got to change. You got to
Yeah.
think long term. You can't just think short term anymore because it's just not there. It's
Yeah.
just not, and it's just not. It's far. We're farther and farther from being able to buy your way into success.
Yeah. No, and I see that on all sides of the business, operations and human resources and
Yeah.
recruiting and all of that as well. So it sounds like zooming out and taking a strategic look at the long-term plays and kind of setting up your processes and, like you said, adapting and pivoting as necessary. But looking at it for long-term as opposed to like swimming in the same thing you've been doing. It's get curious, create a plan, think long-term, where your investments are being made.
I saw a stat. Hold on, I'm going to pull this up. So I thought this was very interesting. Somebody posted this today on LinkedIn. I don't know, it's a pretty credible source. So marketing salaries jumped by as much as 50%.
Wow.
And this is from Marketing Week, right? So there are more marketing roles available than candidates to fill them, right? Like, so if you're recruiting, like if your CEO is not, pushing out your message, regardless how big your company is, and like driving some excitement, if you're not sharing, some fun stuff your company's doing, or if you're not sharing some fun stuff your company's, like, you have to start to figure out how you're going to get talent, right? I mean, to hire good salespeople, you got to have a marketing plan around that, especially for the larger size businesses. And so, to your point, I just think of the days of like, especially in this market, like where the employee owns the market, right? Not the employer. You got to have some strategy. You got to have some real good marketing strategies to draw people in, or you're going to be paying a lot of money for an outsourced
Yeah.
headhunter, right?
Yeah. No, 20 to 30% of an annual salary on the low end. And the time
you can invest that into a marketing program, or you can invest that into a headhunter. And I'm not saying either one is right or wrong, because we use sometimes headhunters too. Like we've got a really good one. But moral of the story is, you want to pay how long? There's a long-term, short-term thinking, right? Like, would we rather invest 20 to 30% into a marketing program so that eventually, like, we just build this funnel of like, people that come to us, and we can, lessen the load on a headhunter and make that money back. I mean, there's just so many new ways you have to think about your business.
You sound exhausted.
It is. It's exhausting running a business these today. Like, I mean, I'm not saying it hasn't always been exhausting, but it's just with everything kind of evolving and changing. Like, it just gets tougher and tougher. I mean, on all aspects of your business, and you really got to be all in. There's just no way around it.
Sounds like a little bit of your grandfather's mentality of, just no excuses, just saying this is what I'm faced with and looking for solutions to overcome those obstacles, as opposed to resigning and saying, well, this is what it is, or staying stuck in your thinking and staying stuck in where you're at. So you've got to adapt with the times. And I can see that you and your agency are doing that. So I'm excited for you and your growth. Where can people find you and connect with you?
So we have a new website going up this week. So I wouldn't go to our website quite yet for redoing the whole thing. But you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Would love to chat if you have questions. Always curious to hear what other people are doing that's working, especially in marketing. We build a community with Skills Lab at skillslab.io. But at the end of the day, I'm always curious. I'm a curious person and just love to connect with people. So if you want to connect and have a chat, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. And I have recently listened to a bunch of your kind of archived podcast episodes on selling and everything having to do with selling, sales, recruiting salespeople. I think it's super valuable content. Can you remind us of the name of the podcast?
So I used to have my own podcast, but I've put that on hold. It was Business Banter. So, but you can check that out on skillslab.io. Hey, I'll give you props. Doing a podcast is a lot of work, right? I don't think people realize it, but it's worth it. Like, I'm going to start one back up here pretty soon, but I'm going to do it in a completely different direction. But I will tell you, it's a lot of work, but in the end, it's probably one of the most fulfilling things you can do, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And I just, I referenced some of your content from like 1 to 2 or like 2 to 3 years ago, and it was still relevant and valuable for me. So I think having evergreen content that lives so people can get to know you and obviously take some value out of those lessons and conversations is super cool too. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate you joining me today. And please follow Jack on all of his social channels and connect with him over at LinkedIn. And check out Creation Agency website when it gets back up and running in skills.io. And this is the Systems Culture Growth Podcast. Thank you so much for joining.